It's the little details that are vital. Little things make big things happen. I believe this is such a true fact. The little things really do add up to big things. And this quote is by John Wooden, who is one of my favorite basketball coaches to read about and study. And I think he definitely believed that the little details can add up and make huge differences. So I chose detail-oriented to be the topic of my presentation. Detail, as described by the dictionary, is the extended treatment of or attention to particular items. Being detailed is marked by the abundant detail or by the thoroughness in treating small items or parts. I think it's really easy for people to kind of overlook or push under the rug when someone says I'm detail oriented, just that like everyone is, or that it's easy to be. And I think that's definitely not true. I think people who pay attention to detail are probably overlooked sometimes, and I just don't know if everyone really grasps what that means and how important being detail oriented can be. Nick Saban is someone I think definitely doesn't underestimate that quality. I think he teaches his player that it's not the wins and the losses, but it's the ability to do the things every day that lead up to winning or losing. The quote that I have here is by Nick Saban, and I think it's just an awesome quote. It's not the human nature to be great. It's human nature to survive, to be average and do what you have to do to get by. That is normal. When you have something good happen, it's the special people that can stay focused, pay attention to detail, work to get better, and not be satisfied with what they have accomplished. I think Nick Saban and John Wooden are two coaches who definitely believe that the details matter and that they transfer from everyday life into sports and vice versa. And I think it's just something that coaches need to really emphasize on a daily basis. We teach our kids how to behave by what we allow, what we stop, what we ignore, and what we reinforce. This kind of goes with what I just said. I think that paying attention to detail is something that you can't just do every once in a while. I think it needs to be reinforced. I think that like if you're going to cut corners in one area of your life, you'll probably cut corners in others. And so if you're going to pay attention to the details and do things the right way, you need to have it so that it's ingrained in you all the time. So you're doing it in your athletic events, in the classroom, and just in everyday life. A few examples of paying attention to detail or being detail oriented. For me, I use some basketball examples because I'm a basketball coach. And so I think in sports, a few of these are basketball specific, but there's a million examples of different ways that people are detail oriented in sports. For us, starting behind the line in the drill is huge. Just being able to not have to have a coach stand next to you and say start behind the line or get both feet behind the line. Even that extra toe over the line is something that is a tiny detail but super important. If you're going to cut that corner, you might cut corners other places. And so starting behind the line is an attention to detail thing, and our practices that we pay attention to. Holding your follow through in a shot. Jump stopping is a tiny detail in the game of basketball, but it's super important in fundamentals. But if you think about the whole game, like a jump stop is a very tiny, tiny detail. Calling for the ball. We talk a lot about writing thank you notes to people who have helped them. That's not basketball specific, but we use it in our team a lot about that. We don't just say thank you every once in a while to our bus driver. We say thank you every single time we get off the bus. It's a small detail, but I think it makes a difference. Handing the ball to the official is a tiny detail, but I think it shows class. And so that is something we kind of ingrain in our kids all the time too, is that we hand the ball to the official. We don't chuck it at them. We don't slam it down. I think that's a small detail in the big, broad spectrum of the game, but I think it definitely makes a difference. I think lineups, anthems, huddles, timeouts are example used in probably all sports. We are very particular about which way we kind of come in for a huddle or how we set up our timeouts. And these are really small details, but they definitely let our timeout run more efficiently. And I think across the board, lots of sports have examples of where they are very particular about the way they line up for something or the way they call a timeout or just examples like that. Examples in everyday life that are detail oriented or people that are detail oriented probably do in their everyday life is that you're on time. Being on time every time is something I think that detail oriented people do. Shaking hands, I think, is a good example of being detail oriented. I think, you never get a second chance to make a first impression. And so shaking someone's hand and greeting them kind and warm the first time you meet them is maybe a small detail, but I think it can go a long way. Finishing projects and not just turning them in half done. Sending emails that don't just say, hey, I need this, this, and this. I think, sending an email that's a little focused on details of the greeting and not just, hey, I need this is kind of a small detail in maybe someone's day in the office, but it could be something that makes a huge difference in their lives. We joke about it in our office all the time. Mowing the grass is something our coach is like, if I'm going to mow the grass, I'm going to do it well and pay attention to detail, and I'm not just going to go through the motions. And so that's kind of our joke all the time, is that being a detail-oriented person can transfer to everything you do. It can be from mowing the grass to jump stopping to sending an email. And so I think it's something that, it's something that gets ingrained in you. And so you don't just do it when you want. You do it all the time. And it's something that can translate all over. What we do on some great occasion will probably depend on what we already are. And what we already are will result from previous years of self-discipline. I think this is what I just mentioned before, that being detail-oriented or paying attention to detail is something that becomes a discipline. It becomes something you do and who you are. It's not just a thing you pick and choose when you want to. And so this quote definitely kind of describes, it's the self-discipline and the paying attention to detail on an everyday basis and at every part of your life that's going to add up to this great occasion or maybe some great success in the future. I'm going to end by reading you a little poem. It actually is a poem that I have on my desk, so I can see it right now. It sits framed on my desk. It's actually in every single one of our kids' lockers. And we quote it probably nonstop, almost to the point where we almost mock it. But it's a great poem. I love it, and I think about it almost every day, and it's all about paying attention to detail. So the poem is called Pretty Good is Pretty Bad. There once was a pretty good student who sat in a pretty good class and was taught by a pretty good teacher who always let pretty good pass. He wasn't terrific at reading, he wasn't a whiz-bang at math, but for him, education was leading straight down a pretty good path. He didn't find school too exciting, but he wanted to do pretty well, and he didn't have some trouble with writing since no one taught him to spell. When doing arithmetic problems, pretty good was regarded as fine. 5 plus 5 needn't always add up to be 10. A pretty good answer was 9. The pretty good class that he sat in was part of a pretty good school, and the student was not an exception. On the contrary, he was the rule. The pretty good student, or the pretty good school that he went to, was there in a pretty good town, and nobody there seemed to notice he could not tell a verb from a noun. The pretty good student, in fact, was part of a pretty good mob, and the first time he knew what he lacked was when he looked for a pretty good job. It was then when he sought out a position he discovered that life could be tough, and he soon had a sneaking suspicion pretty good might not be good enough. The pretty good town in our story was part of a pretty good state, which had a pretty good aspirations and prayed for a pretty good fate. There once was a pretty good nation, pretty proud of the greatness it had, which learned much too late, if you want to be great, pretty good is in fact pretty bad. So our constant quote in the office is pretty good is pretty bad. If you're going to do something, do it well, do it right. And that is something that we really try to get our kids to believe in on and off the court. It's something I try to believe in on and off the court. And so that's why I have the poem framed by my desk. Pretty good is pretty bad.